My name is Audrey Wilson. I'm 34 years old. Until this past Monday, I served as the marketing director at Preston & Shaw, among Connecticut's most distinguished firms. When they terminated my employment, claiming financial constraints despite my exceptional performance record, I remained silent about the technology business I privately owned or the seaside property registered under my name. That very evening, my father, Henry, stared directly into my eyes and declared, "Get your things together. Those who fail have no place in this household." Subsequently, my husband Richard spat at me before departing with his lover. I never anticipated losing everything within a single day, but what followed transformed my entire existence. Before I reveal my tale, please let me know your location in the comments section below. Click that like button and subscribe to witness how they all eventually regretted their decisions. I was raised in a working-class community in Springfield where my father advanced from sales representative to area manager at a production facility. From early childhood, Henry embedded in me the conviction that achievement was life's only acceptable result. Every academic report required perfect grades. Every contest demanded a winning position. Coming in second meant I hadn't applied sufficient effort. Upon graduating with distinction from Boston University, I immediately entered the business world, dedicating 60-hour work weeks to demonstrate my worth. While my peers enjoyed their 20s, I remained hunched over my computer, resolved to earn my father's pride. The recognition I craved seldom materialized. Instead, each accomplishment was acknowledged with, "Fine. What comes next?" 5 years ago, at a professional conference in New York, I encountered Richard Blackwood. He was attractive, self-assured, and employed as a sales manager for a medical supply company. His grin captured my notice from across the venue, and before the evening ended, we had shared contact information. Our courtship progressed rapidly. Within half a year, we were betrothed. By the subsequent spring, we wed in an extravagant ceremony that my father largely financed, frequently reminding me of his magnanimous contribution. We purchased a stunning colonial residence in an affluent Connecticut community. Externally, our existence appeared flawless. Richard operated a premium European automobile. I advanced through the corporate hierarchy at Preston & Shaw, ultimately attaining marketing director status by age 31. We organized social gatherings where visitors remarked on our lovely residence and apparently ideal union. However, privately, circumstances were quite different. As my professional life continued to prosper, Richard became progressively bitter. What began as light-hearted remarks about my work commitment evolved into indirect hostile observations. Another evening shift, I suppose. Preston & Shaw controls you completely. When I earned my recent advancement, Richard scarcely recognized it, shifting conversation to a contract he was pursuing. The more accomplished I became, the more withdrawn he turned. My association with my father stayed complex. Every Sunday meal at my parents' upscale home transformed into an examination regarding my career development. My father would demand specifics about my earnings, my assignments, my future plans. My mother, Elaine, would remain silent, sometimes touching my hand beneath the table when my father grew especially harsh. She had existed 38 years in his dominance, and while I recognized the compassion in her gaze, she never challenged him. "You must target CMO by 35, Audrey," my father would state, slicing his steak without glancing upward. Preston & Shaw has maintained the identical chief marketing officer for 7 years. He should be prepared for retirement. "Henry, allow her to savor her meal," my mother would try, only to be quieted by his dismissive gesture. Meanwhile, at the office, conditions began shifting when fresh leadership assumed control of Preston & Shaw 18 months prior. The cooperative atmosphere I had flourished in gradually evolved into something more competitive. Martin Davis, the newly appointed vice president of marketing, who became my immediate superior, appeared to sabotage me consistently. Projects I had launched were abruptly transferred. My contributions during meetings were regularly interrupted or ignored. Then peculiar incidents began occurring. Presentations I had created would mysteriously contain mistakes when accessed during client sessions. Messages I was confident I had transmitted would be absent from my sent folder. Customer responses that were favorable would be communicated to senior management as uncertain or unfavorable. Speculation about workforce reduction started spreading throughout the workplace. Multiple veteran employees from various divisions were dismissed, consistently with identical reasoning: financial limitations. Susan Parker, my associate from the design department, cautioned me during a coffee pause. "They're eliminating the established staff, Audrey," she murmured. "Anyone present before the new administration faces danger. They prefer their chosen personnel." What nobody at the workplace or within my family understood was that 3 years earlier, my grandfather had bequeathed me an unexpected legacy. We had maintained closeness during my youth, and he had discreetly invested in technology securities that yielded exceptional returns. The inheritance included a note stating, "Audrey, maintain your personal security blanket. Freedom represents the ultimate protection." Following his guidance, I utilized portion of the inheritance to acquire a gorgeous coastal residence in Rhode Island, registering it exclusively under my identity. I additionally invested in a promising startup technology enterprise named Horizon Digital. What commenced as a modest investment expanded considerably as the business thrived, eventually granting me substantial ownership participation. I maintained these financial choices confidential. Richard had remarked whenever I made autonomous decisions, implying that marriages shouldn't harbor secrets. My father would have demanded I invest the funds according to his recommendations or criticized me for not utilizing it to relocate to a more prestigious area. The coastal property became my private refuge, a location I visited periodically under the pretense of business retreats or female gatherings. My financial autonomy remained my carefully protected secret, a security measure I never anticipated requiring. However, as my work atmosphere grew increasingly antagonistic and my marriage more tense, I discovered myself contemplating that beach residence more frequently. I never envisioned how rapidly things would collapse or how quickly I would require that protection my grandfather had urged me to establish. Monday mornings at Preston and Shaw usually commenced with departmental conferences, and this specific Monday appeared typical. I arrived promptly as customary, organizing notes for my quarterly marketing strategy presentation. The meeting room slowly filled with my team colleagues, but I observed several unknown individuals from human resources present, including Pamela Winters, the HR supervisor who seldom attended our sessions. Martin Davis entered finally, avoiding visual contact with me as he occupied his position at the table's head. Before I could commence my presentation, he cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I have a declaration," Martin announced, his tone artificially professional. "As part of our continuing reorganization, we are implementing modifications to the marketing division effective today." My abdomen contracted as every gaze in the room focused on me. "Audrey Wilson will be departing Preston and Shaw immediately. We appreciate her service and extend best wishes for her future pursuits." The room became quiet. My team colleagues looked down at their notebooks or gazed at me with expressions varying from amazement to sympathy. I sat motionless, unable to comprehend what was occurring. "This must be a prank, correct?" I eventually succeeded in saying. "I guarantee you it is not," Pamela from HR interrupted, pushing a document across the surface. "This includes details regarding your separation compensation and benefit continuation. We require you to remove your personal belongings today." "On what basis am I being fired?" I inquired, my voice remarkably composed despite the emotional storm within me. "We are dissolving your role due to departmental reorganization," Pamela responded automatically. "This is not a performance-related determination." That was false, and everyone present understood it. I had routinely surpassed my objectives, secured major customers, and earned outstanding evaluations until Martin assumed leadership. "Security will help you collect your possessions," Pamela continued. "Company procedure for executive departures." The shame of being removed by security consumed me as I gathered my office contents under the vigilant observation of a guard named Thomas, who regretfully positioned himself by the entrance. My family photographs, professional awards, and the small plant I had maintained for 5 years all entered a cardboard container. When I attempted to access my workstation to preserve personal connections, I found my credentials had been deactivated already. My documents, including personal images and files, were now unreachable. They had obviously orchestrated this extensively beforehand. As I prepared to depart, Susan entered my office, quickly hugging me before whispering, "Martin has been consulting with customers secretly for weeks. This isn't about finances. Contact me later." The security officer accompanied me through the workplace past coworkers who looked away, down the elevator and completely to my vehicle in the parking structure. As I positioned the container in my trunk, the truth started penetrating. After 7 years of commitment, 60-hour work weeks, missed holidays, and sacrificed personal time, I had been discarded without notice. I remained in my automobile for almost 20 minutes, clutching the steering wheel, too shocked to weep. My phone vibrated with text messages from team colleagues expressing surprise and encouragement, but they seemed empty. These identical individuals had observed silently as I was removed. The journey home was hazy. I practiced how I would inform Richard, envisioning he might finally support me through this ordeal. Perhaps this mutual hardship would even strengthen our bond. When I arrived at our driveway at 11:30 that morning, I was startled to see Richard's vehicle present. He rarely returned home during working hours. Momentarily, I felt comfort. I wouldn't need to wait to share my update. I entered through the garage announcing, "Richard, are you here?" Something occurred at work. The house remained silent except for muted noises from upstairs. As I ascended the stairs, I noticed Richard's briefcase and coat scattered carelessly on the steps, uncommon for his usually organized habits. The bedroom entrance was slightly ajar. I pushed it further and stopped. Richard was hurriedly dressing, his hair messy. The shower was operating in our master bathroom. "Audrey, why are you home?" His voice broke with alarm. Before I could respond, his mobile buzzed on the nightstand. I caught sight of the display. A text from someone called Jessica with 3 heart symbols. "Who is Jessica?" I inquired, my voice almost inaudible. Richard's expression shifted from surprise to fury within moments. "Why are you examining my phone, and why aren't you at the office?" "I was just terminated," I stated simply. "And you haven't addressed my inquiry." The bathroom entrance opened and a young lady emerged wearing my robe. She appeared to be in her mid-20s with lengthy blonde locks. She stopped upon noticing me. "You must be Jessica," I remarked, amazed by my composed manner. "Audrey, this isn't what it appears," Richard started using his professional voice. "Really? Because it appears you're conducting an affair in our bedroom in our residence on a Monday morning when you should be working." Jessica seized her garments and withdrew to the bathroom. Richard's demeanor grew stern. "This wouldn't have occurred if you had been a genuine spouse instead of a career-focused machine," he declared harshly. "When did you last actually participate in this marriage? How long has this been happening?" I insisted, disregarding his effort to fault me. 6 months, he confessed with startling absence of guilt. "Jessica comprehends me. She prioritizes me." 6 months. Half a year of deception. All those evening shifts he claimed to be laboring or meeting clients, he had been with her. "I want both of you removed from my residence," I stated, my hands trembling. Richard chuckled. "Your residence? I contribute half the mortgage payment. And regarding finances, how will that function now that you're jobless?" The malicious grin that appeared across his features revealed everything. He had been anticipating, perhaps hoping for my career to falter. "How did you learn I lost my position?" "I only discovered it 2 hours ago." Richard's brief bewilderment transformed into another smirk. "I didn't know, but I'm not shocked. You've been unfocused for months." I moved closer to him. "Leave. We can address the residence and finances later through attorneys." "Attorneys?" He laughed once more. "With what funds, Audrey? Your father's? Do you believe he'll assist you now that you've failed?" Something within me broke. I seized the framed photograph of our wedding from the dresser and threw it against the wall. The glass scattered across the wooden flooring. Richard's face twisted with fury. He approached me, his finger pointing at my face. "You're insane. You possess nothing without me. Nothing." Then he performed something I never thought conceivable. He spat in my face. The warm saliva struck my cheek as I remained frozen with disbelief. "Jessica and I were intending to inform you this weekend regardless," he declared, retrieving a suitcase from the wardrobe and tossing clothing into it. "She's relocating with me. We'll be utilizing my bonus to place a deposit on a condominium downtown." Jessica appeared from the bathroom, completely clothed, avoiding visual contact as she rapidly collected her handbag and mobile. "You can retain this suburban jail," Richard proceeded. "I never desired it regardless. It was constantly your father's concept of achievement, not mine." My phone rang, interrupting the hostility. My father's name appeared on the display. "Perfect timing," Richard sneered. "Daddy calling to monitor his little princess. Perhaps he can resolve this disaster for you too." I rejected the call, but shortly after, a message appeared. "Come to the residence immediately. Your mother and I must speak with you." Richard closed his suitcase and grasped Jessica's hand. At the bedroom entrance, he turned back to me. "I'll return for the remainder of my belongings. Don't alter the locks if you understand what's beneficial for you." And then they departed. I heard the front entrance slam followed by the sound of Richard's vehicle reversing from the driveway. I remained in my bedroom. My profession and marriage destroyed within hours of each other. And now, based on my father's message, there was more approaching. The 20-minute journey to my parents' residence in Fairfield provided me minimal time to collect myself. I tried to remove my tears at traffic signals, applied makeup to the dark rings forming beneath my eyes, and rehearsed explanations that might appease my father. Nothing appeared sufficient. Their residence stood imposing as always at the conclusion of a circular driveway, a 5-bedroom colonial on 2 acres of flawlessly landscaped grounds. My father had acquired it 15 years prior when he became CEO of his corporation, a persistent physical symbol of his definition of achievement. My mother opened the entrance before I could press the bell. "He's in his office," she murmured, her eyes expressing both compassion and caution. "William is present, too." My younger brother, William, had consistently been the mediator in the family, strategically positioned between my father's demands and reality. He worked for my father's corporation, carefully managing the favoritism while maintaining sufficient independence to preserve his mental health. I located them in the office, my father behind his mahogany desk, William uncomfortably seated on the leather couch. Neither rose when I entered. "Sit down, Audrey," my father directed, indicating the chair across from his desk, positioning me like an employee being evaluated. "I prefer to stand," I responded, gathering what little energy remained. My father's jaw tensed. "I received a troubling call from Martin Davis this afternoon. He's an old golfing companion of mine." Of course he was. The relationship I had never known about suddenly clarified so much about the previous 18 months. "Martin informed me that you were dismissed from Preston and Shaw today. He mentioned they had concerns about your dedication and performance for some period." "That's completely untrue," I declared, my voice escalating. "I was their highest performing director. This was political, not performance-related." My father gestured dismissively. "There are always multiple perspectives to these circumstances, Audrey. The significant question is, what's your strategy?" No compassion, no presumption of innocence, just immediate pressure for a resolution. "I just lost my position 6 hours ago, Dad. I don't have a completely developed strategy yet." "This is precisely the issue," he responded, standing to emphasize his position. "You've always lacked preparation. Achievement requires anticipating difficulties." My mother entered with a tray of coffee, her customary peace gesture during family disputes. "Dinner will be prepared in 30 minutes," she announced to nobody specifically. I didn't realize I was remaining for dinner, I stated. Of course you are, my father responded. We must discuss your future steps. William might have contacts at Brunswick Marketing. William shifted uncomfortably. I could make some inquiries, he offered, his tone suggesting the hopelessness of such attempts. I appreciate that, but I require some time to absorb what occurred today, I stated. My father scoffed. Time is a privilege for the accomplished, Audrey. You must be distributing resumes tonight. There's more, I declared, deciding to reveal both issues simultaneously. Richard and I are divorcing. I discovered him with another woman today. The room became quiet. My mother's hand moved to her mouth. William gazed at the floor. Well, my father finally stated, perhaps if you had concentrated more on your marriage and less on advancing professionally, this wouldn't have occurred. His words struck me like a physical assault. Are you actually blaming me for Richard's infidelity? Henry, my mother interrupted. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Elaine, he snapped. And Audrey must hear the truth. You pursued that promotion last year despite Richard's concerns about your schedule. You insisted on taking that business trip to London when you should have attended his company event. Actions have results. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Richard has been unfaithful for 6 months with a woman from his workplace. How precisely is that my responsibility? Men have requirements, Audrey, my father responded, as if explaining something to a child. When wives become too autonomous, too career-oriented, men often seek confirmation elsewhere. That's revolting, I whispered. It's reality, he countered. Now you've lost both your position and your marriage in the same day. What does that indicate about your priorities? My mother attempted once more to calm the situation. Let's discuss this over dinner. I prepared your favorite chicken, Audrey. We moved to the dining area in tense silence. The elaborate table arrangement with fine china and crystal glasses felt ridiculously formal given the circumstances. I spoke with Richard this afternoon, my father announced as we occupied our seats. The revelation shocked me. You what? He called me very distressed. He said you threw objects and became hysterical when he suggested a separation. He was in our bed with another woman, I exclaimed. And he didn't suggest a separation. He spat in my face and departed with her. That doesn't sound like Richard, my father replied calmly. He's always been rational. I'm sure you're exaggerating. Why would I fabricate that? I demanded. Because you're emotional currently, he stated. Richard mentioned you've been unstable recently, possibly due to work pressure. My brother finally contributed. Dad, maybe we should hear Audrey's perspective completely before reaching conclusions. My father ignored him. Richard also mentioned financial worries now that you're unemployed. He worried about your spending patterns. I laughed bitterly. My spending patterns. Richard purchased a $40,000 watch last month. He leases a new vehicle every 2 years. Nevertheless, my father continued, you must consider your financial situation seriously. Your mother and I cannot support poor choices. I haven't requested your assistance, I stated quietly. Not yet, he replied. But without employment and with a divorce approaching, it's only a matter of time. I placed down my fork. My appetite completely vanished. I'll resolve this independently. Think about how your expertise is specific to a company that just terminated you. Your industry is small and information spreads quickly. Martin mentioned they might provide a reference if you leave quietly, but that goodwill has a time limit. I have savings, I stated, though the joint account Richard and I shared was likely already depleted. Sufficient for a mortgage, attorneys, and living costs for how long? 3 months. 6. My father shook his head. This is why I always instructed you to plan for worst-case situations. Henry, my mother said gently, Perhaps now isn't the time for lessons. Then when, Elaine? After she's bankrupted herself? After she's damaged her reputation beyond recovery? He turned back to me. You have 1 week to obtain new employment, something equivalent to what you possessed. Otherwise, don't return to this residence with grievances or requests for assistance. You cannot be serious, I murmured. I am always serious about achievement and failure, Audrey. You understand that I didn't raise my children to make excuses or accept defeat. I didn't fail, I insisted. I was forced out by your golfing companion after years of outstanding performance. Results are what count in this world, he responded coldly. And currently, your results demonstrate failure on all fronts. I rose suddenly, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. Thank you for dinner, Mom. I think I should leave. Audrey, please, my mother started. But my father interrupted her. Let her leave, Elaine. Perhaps some time alone will help her consider her decisions. As I grabbed my handbag and headed for the entrance, my father shouted after me. Remember what I told you, Audrey. 1 week to organize your life. Pack your belongings and determine where you're going from here. Failures don't belong in this family. The drive away from my parents' residence was a haze of tears and rage. I had lost my position, discovered my husband's betrayal, and been dismissed by my family all in a single day. I had nowhere to turn, no one to rely on, and no idea what tomorrow would hold. The Harbor View Hotel wasn't particularly elegant, but it was clean and impersonal. The desk attendant barely noticed me as I registered, for which I was thankful, given my tear-streaked face and disheveled state. Room 214 would be my residence tonight. Possibly longer. I sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed, surrounded by the standard hotel furnishings, and finally permitted myself to completely collapse. The sobs emerged from somewhere deep and primitive, years of suppressed feelings erupting simultaneously. I wept for my lost profession, my violated trust, my father's harshness, and my mother's silent participation. I wept until my throat was sore and my eyes were puffy. When the initial surge of emotion diminished, I examined my phone. 3 missed calls from Sarah, my college roommate, and one of the few friends I had sustained despite my workaholic lifestyle. 2 from Megan, my neighbor, who had become a close confidant. A message from William. Dad was way out of line. Call if you need anything. I contacted Sarah first. Her familiar voice instantly soothing. Audrey, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I'm at the Harbor View Hotel, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. Everything collapsed today, Sarah. Everything. I heard about Preston and Shaw. Susan contacted me. That's complete nonsense how they treated you. You know Susan? We met at your holiday party last year. We've stayed in touch. She said the whole office is in shock. I had no idea they had connected, which made me realize how detached I had become from my own existence, how little attention I had paid to the relationships surrounding me. Richard was unfaithful, I added. I caught him today with some woman from his workplace. And my father essentially told me I deserved it for concentrating too much on my profession. That absolute scoundrel, Sarah exclaimed. And I wasn't sure if she meant Richard or my father. Both, I replied. Stay where you are, she continued. I'm coming to you and Megan is with me. We'll be there in 30 minutes. True to her promise, Sarah arrived with Megan and an overnight bag. They brought wine, chocolate, and their steadfast support. For the first time that day, I felt something other than despair. You need to obtain a lawyer immediately, Megan advised. She had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier. Richard will try to claim half of everything, and given what you've told us about him, he won't play fairly. Diane Hopkins, I remembered suddenly. She helped me arrange the beach house purchase and my investment in Horizon Digital. You have a beach house? Sarah asked, surprised. I had never told them about the inheritance or my secret investments. It had become such a practice to keep these things private that I had maintained the secrecy even with my closest friends. My grandfather left me an inheritance 3 years ago, I explained. I used it to purchase a place in Rhode Island and invest in a tech startup. Richard doesn't know. Neither does my family. Megan smiled for the first time that evening. Audrey Wilson, you magnificent secret keeper. That could be your salvation right now. While they ordered room service, I began taking stock of what I actually possessed versus what I had lost. Lost. My 60-hour-per-week position, my marriage, my family support, my house potentially, my sense of security. Had a beach house in my name only, a significant ownership stake in a growing tech company, my education and experience, my professional reputation despite Preston and Shaw's efforts, and apparently friends who would abandon everything to sit in a hotel room with me on the worst day of my life. I opened my laptop and accessed the documents related to Horizon Digital. My initial investment of $50,000 from my inheritance had grown substantially as the company secured additional funding rounds. According to the last valuation, my stake was worth over $2 million on paper. The beach house purchased for $400,000 had likely appreciated as well. You need to protect these assets before Richard discovers them, Megan urged. Call Diane first thing tomorrow. While browsing through my emails, I noticed one from Zoe, my former assistant at Preston and Shaw, sent just hours after I was escorted out. Martin deleted all your files, but I backed everything up last week when things started feeling strange. I have copies of all your work, client contacts, and the emails where Martin took credit for your Phillips campaign. Call me when you can. Loyal, perceptive Zoe. I had always appreciated her attention to detail, but never imagined how valuable it would become. Another email caught my attention. This one from Susan. Check your junk folder for emails from David Nichols from the past 3 months. Martin has been filtering your messages. David Nichols was our biggest client. I immediately checked my junk folder and found dozens of emails from David, including several expressing confusion about why I had stopped responding to his messages and concerns about recent campaign directions. They sabotaged you, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. They deliberately isolated you from your clients. Martin Davis is my father's golfing companion, I said. He's probably been feeding my father information for months while setting me up to fail. A text message alert interrupted our conversation. It was from Richard, checked our joint account. Needed to secure funds for upcoming expenses. We can discuss division of assets with lawyers. I quickly logged into our bank account to find it completely drained. $45,000 gone. Can he do that? Sarah asked. Legally, yes. It's a joint account, Megan explained. But a judge will take this into consideration during divorce proceedings. Document everything. As the night progressed, we formulated a strategy. I would call Diane first thing in the morning to begin divorce proceedings and protect my assets. I would move to the beach house temporarily until things settled. I would use Zoe's backed up files to establish what had really happened at Preston and Shaw. Around midnight, Sarah and Megan finally fell asleep on the second queen bed. But I remained awake, my mind racing with everything that had transpired and everything that needed to be done. I remembered my grandfather's words from his letter. Independence is the greatest form of security. He had known somehow that I would need this safety net. Perhaps he had recognized in me the same drive that had isolated me from authentic relationships. Perhaps he had seen how my pursuit of my father's approval had led me to ignore my own needs. Or perhaps he had simply wanted to give me options his own daughter, my mother, had never had. By dawn, my tears had dried and a new emotion had taken their place. Determination. I had spent my entire life seeking validation from my father and later from Richard. I had pursued external markers of success while neglecting to define success for myself. That ended today. As the first light of morning filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, I made 3 promises to myself. 1. I would rebuild my life on my own terms, not according to anyone else's definition of success. 2. I would never again make myself small or silent to accommodate someone else's ego. 3. I would remember this feeling of rock bottom, not to dwell in it, but to recognize how far I would climb from here. I picked up my phone and dialed Diane Hopkins' number. When her voicemail answered, I left a clear, concise message. Diane, this is Audrey Wilson. I need your help protecting my assets and beginning divorce proceedings. Also, I may have a wrongful termination case to discuss. Please call me as soon as possible. Next, I texted Zoe. Can you meet today? I need those files and your insights on what really happened. The night of devastation had transformed into a morning of action. And for the first time in my adult life, I was acting solely for myself, not to please my father or support my husband or impress my colleagues. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. As Sarah and Megan stirred awake, I made one final call to the beach house caretaker, arranging to have the place prepared for my arrival. It was time to claim the safety net my grandfather had helped me create. It was time to disappear from the life everyone thought they knew and emerge as the woman I was meant to be. Diane Hopkins' office projected exactly the kind of confidence I needed. Located in downtown Hartford, the corner suite featured floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and walls adorned with her law degrees and professional recognitions. Diane herself, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with prematurely silver hair, had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had broken countless glass ceilings. Let me get this straight, she said after I had recounted the events of the previous day. In the span of 24 hours, you were terminated from your position, discovered your husband's infidelity, and were essentially disowned by your father. That about covers it, I replied. And your husband has emptied your joint account of $45,000? Yes. But he's unaware of your ownership of the beach property in Rhode Island or your stake in Horizon Digital. Correct. Those were purchased with my inheritance and kept separate. Diane smiled for the first time. Then we're starting from a much better position than most of my clients. First order of business is to file for divorce immediately citing infidelity. Rhode Island is a fault state which works in our favor. She retrieved several forms and began completing them with practiced efficiency. Next, we need to document the withdrawal of funds from your joint account. This will be considered dissipation of marital assets and work strongly in your favor. What about my position? I asked. Do I have any recourse there? Possibly. Employment law isn't my specialty, but if you have evidence of sabotage or discrimination, there could be a wrongful termination case. I can refer you to a colleague who specializes in that area. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, we had drafted divorce papers, documented the depleted bank account, and created a strategy for protecting my separate assets. Diane also advised me to relocate to the beach house immediately. Rhode Island residency will simplify the divorce proceedings, she explained. And frankly, it puts physical distance between you and the people who have betrayed you. As I left her office, I felt the first stirrings of control returning. The next stop was the beach house, a place that had previously been just an occasional retreat, but would now become my sanctuary. The property sat on a small bluff overlooking the Atlantic, a modern 2-bedroom structure with walls of glass facing the ocean. The caretaker, Mr. Jennings, had prepared it as requested, stocking the refrigerator and airing out rooms that had been closed for months. Will you be staying long this time, Miss Wilson? He asked as he handed me the keys. Indefinitely, I replied. This is home now. That afternoon, I met Zoe at a coffee shop halfway between Connecticut and Rhode Island. She arrived with an external hard drive containing all my work files, client communications, and evidence of the sabotage that had been occurring. Martin had IT redirect all emails from top clients to himself starting 3 months ago, she explained. He would respond as if he were you, deliberately missing key client requests or changing strategy points you had established. How did you discover this? IT guy Harold has a crush on me, she admitted with a slight blush. He mentioned the unusual email routing protocol, thinking I already knew about it. The hard drive contained dozens of examples of Martin taking credit for my work, altering my presentations before client meetings, and systematically undermining my position. It was more than enough for a wrongful termination case, possibly even a defamation suit. "What will you do now?" Zoe asked. "First, I need to secure my future," I replied. "But after that, there will be consequences for Preston and Shaw." My next call was to the board of Horizon Digital. As a significant investor, I had attended meetings, but taken a mostly passive role, allowing the founders to run the company without interference. Today, I requested an emergency meeting. 2 days later, I sat across from Alex Mercer and Jordan Williams, the co-founders of Horizon, in their San Francisco office. I had flown in specifically for this meeting using one of my credit cards that Richard didn't know about. "Audrey, we were surprised by your request," Alex began. "Is everything okay?" "Actually, no," I replied honestly. "My professional and personal circumstances have changed dramatically, and I need to take a more active role in my investments." I explained my situation without unnecessary emotion or detail. These were businessmen, and I approached them as a businesswoman. "I see," Jordan said when I finished. "And how can we help?" "Two things. First, I would like to formalize my advisory role with Horizon. My marketing expertise could benefit the company as you enter your growth phase." They exchanged glances, clearly intrigued. "We've been discussing bringing on marketing leadership," Alex admitted. "Your background would be ideal." "Second," I continued, "I would like to accelerate the next funding round. My intelligence suggests Preston and Shaw is facing internal challenges that could present an acquisition opportunity." This was a calculated risk. Preston and Shaw wasn't publicly traded, but industry rumors suggested they were seeking additional investment due to client losses. If Horizon could position itself as a potential buyer or merger partner, it would send shockwaves through the industry. By the end of the meeting, we had drafted an agreement making me the chief marketing advisor for Horizon Digital with a modest salary and additional equity compensation. More importantly, they agreed to my strategic suggestion regarding Preston and Shaw. The news broke the following week. Tech upstart Horizon Digital signals interest in traditional marketing firm Preston and Shaw. The article quoted me directly as a major investor and newly appointed chief marketing advisor, discussing the synergies between digital innovation and traditional marketing expertise. The reaction was immediate. My phone exploded with messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, and clients curious about this unexpected development. The Preston and Shaw stock price jumped at the prospect of acquisition, then plummeted when internal documents mysteriously leaked to industry publications, showing client dissatisfaction and management turmoil. Martin Davis called me directly, his voice strained. "What the hell are you doing, Audrey?" "Exploring business opportunities," I replied calmly. "Is there a problem?" "You know exactly what you're doing. The board is in crisis mode because of these leaks and acquisition rumors. Perhaps they should have considered the implications of dismissing their top-performing director under false pretenses," I suggested. "By the way, how is the Phillips account? I heard David was unhappy with recent campaign directions." His sharp intake of breath confirmed what I suspected. The Phillips account, worth millions annually, was in jeopardy. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Nothing from you or Preston and Shaw," I replied truthfully. "I've moved on to better opportunities. But I would suggest reviewing those termination documents your HR department prepared. My lawyer has some concerns about their accuracy and legality." The following day, Pamela from HR reached out with a significantly improved severance package and a letter retracting any negative implications about my performance. The offer included 6 months of salary, continued benefits, and a neutral reference for future employment. Diane advised me to accept the improved terms while still reserving the right to pursue legal action. "This shows they're worried," she noted. "We can use this leverage in negotiations." Meanwhile, Richard had finally discovered that his actions had consequences. His attempts to access our home equity line of credit were blocked by the freeze Diane had placed on our marital assets. His angry voicemails escalated from demanding I be reasonable, to begging for a conversation. "You can't just disappear and freeze everything," his most recent message pleaded. "We need to talk about this like adults." I forwarded each message to Diane without responding directly. When Richard showed up at the beach house unannounced, I calmly informed him that any communication needed to go through our respective attorneys and closed the door. Through the window, I watched his face contort with rage as he realized I was no longer the accommodating wife he could manipulate. When he began pounding on the door, I called the local police who escorted him from the property with a warning about trespassing. The most surprising call came from Jessica, Richard's mistress. "I need to tell you something," she said when I reluctantly answered. "Richard has been lying to me too. We met at a restaurant halfway between Rhode Island and Connecticut." Jessica looked younger in daylight, barely 25, and visibly nervous. "Richard told me you two were already separated," she began. "He said you had agreed to divorce months ago, but were keeping it quiet for financial reasons." "That was a lie," I said simply. "I know that now." She slid a folder across the table. "He also has a gambling problem. These are credit card statements I found in his apartment. He's been hiding them from you." The statements revealed over $70,000 in cash advances taken at casinos over the past year. Richard had been draining our finances long before he emptied our joint account. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because he used me," she replied, her voice hardening. "And when I confronted him about lying about your marriage, he became scary, verbally abusive. I recognized the pattern from my parents' relationship. I won't be that woman." I thanked her for the information and passed it to Diane, who added it to our growing case against Richard. His financial deception would further undermine any claims he might make on my separate assets. 3 weeks after what I now thought of as the collapse, my father finally tracked me down. He appeared at the beach house one Sunday morning, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Your mother is worried about you," he said when I opened the door, unable to admit his own concern. "I'm fine," I replied, not inviting him in. "You haven't been returning our calls." "I've been busy rebuilding the life that collapsed while you were golfing with Martin Davis." His eyes widened slightly. "You know about that?" "I know a lot of things now that I didn't know a month ago," I said. "Like how my own father undermined my career by feeding information to my boss, or how quickly he would believe the worst about his daughter without hearing her side." "That's not fair, Audrey. I simply had concerns about your work-life balance." "No, you had concerns about losing control. You always have. You controlled Mom her entire life. And when I started building my own success, you couldn't handle it." He flinched as if I had struck him. "I only wanted what was best for you." "What you thought was best," I corrected. "But you never asked what I wanted or needed. And when everything fell apart, you blamed me rather than offering support. I was trying to motivate you, to push you to bounce back quickly. By telling me failures don't belong in this family? By taking Richard's side without question. For the first time in my life, I saw my father at a loss for words. If you want to be part of my life moving forward, I continued, things will be very different. I make my own decisions now. I define my own achievement and I don't tolerate disrespect, not even from you. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving him standing on my porch with the sound of waves crashing behind him. Through the window, I watched him stand there for several minutes before finally turning back to his luxury car and driving away. That afternoon, I received a text from my mother. "I am proud of you more than you know." It was the most independent statement I had ever heard from her. My strategic comeback was well underway. With secure housing, new professional opportunities, and legal protections in place, I was no longer in crisis mode. Now I could focus on the longer-term reshaping of my life, and perhaps most satisfyingly, watching those who had underestimated me face the consequences of their actions. 6 weeks after the collapse, I stood on the deck of my beach house, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. These quiet morning moments had become my daily ritual, a time to reflect on how dramatically my life had transformed. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Preston and Shaw stocks plummet amid client exodus and executive shakeup. I smiled as I opened the article to find exactly what I had anticipated. Following the leaked client dissatisfaction reports, 3 major accounts had pulled their business, citing relationship breakdowns and strategic misalignment. The Phillips account, worth $7 million annually, had been the first to go. The article continued. In a stunning development, Vice President of Marketing Martin Davis and several senior executives have been removed by the board of directors following an internal investigation into client management practices and potential ethical violations. Justice had a particular sweetness when it arrived through natural consequences rather than direct action. I had not leaked those client reports, though I certainly knew who had. Zoe, with her quiet efficiency and surprising network of allies within Preston and Shaw, had simply ensured that truth found its way to the appropriate channels. My phone rang, displaying Susan's name. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "Just reading it now," I replied. "How are things inside?" "Chaos," she said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. The board brought in auditors who discovered Martin had been falsifying client feedback reports for months. They also found evidence he had been redirecting your emails and taking credit for your strategies. And Pamela from HR resigned yesterday. Apparently, she was warned about potential legal exposure for her role in your termination. The conversation shifted to Susan's own situation. She had been offered a promotion to fill the leadership vacuum, but was considering other options. "Actually," she ventured, "I was wondering about opportunities at Horizon Digital. Their marketing approach is fascinating." This was the 3rd such inquiry I had received from former colleagues in the past week. I promised to make an introduction to the hiring team, though I recused myself from direct involvement to avoid any appearance of poaching. My consulting business, Wilson Strategic Communications, had launched 2 weeks earlier and already secured 3 clients, including David Nichols, who had been eager to work with me directly after the Preston and Shaw debacle. The beach house's 2nd bedroom had been converted into a functional home office, and I had hired a virtual assistant to manage scheduling and administration. Later that morning, Diane called with updates on the divorce proceedings. "Richard's lawyer reached out about settlement," she reported. "They're suddenly very eager to resolve this quickly." "Why the change?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. "It seems those gambling debts were just the tip of the iceberg. Richard borrowed money from some unsavory characters. He needs cash and he needs it soon." "How much does he want?" "That's the interesting part. He's offering to sign away all claims to your separate assets and the house in exchange for $50,000 and debt forgiveness." It was a surprisingly reasonable offer, considering Richard could have dragged out the proceedings for years, demanding half of everything despite his infidelity. "What's your advice?" I asked. "Take it," Diane said without hesitation. "This is a clean break at minimal cost. We have him over a barrel and he knows it." I agreed to the terms, feeling an odd mix of relief and sadness. Despite everything, finalizing the end of my marriage still carried emotional weight. That evening, I signed the settlement papers Diane had couriered over. By next week, my divorce would be final, just 2 months after discovering Richard's betrayal. The following day brought another unexpected visitor to my door. Jessica stood on my porch, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began, "but I thought you should know Richard has been telling people you forced him into an unfair settlement." "That doesn't surprise me," I replied, finding I no longer cared about Richard's narratives. "I told him to stop," she continued. "We had a huge fight about it. He got physical." I noticed then the fading bruise near her eye, partially concealed by makeup. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She shook her head. "I'm staying with my sister now. But I wanted you to know I filed a police report, and I saved the text where he admitted what he did to you, how he planned it with your father's help." "My father?" I asked, suddenly alert. "Richard said your dad had been feeding him information about your work troubles for months. They discussed how to handle you when the inevitable breakdown happened." She pulled out her phone, showing me text exchanges that confirmed this conspiracy. "May I have copies of these?" I asked, my voice steady despite the renewed sense of betrayal. "That's why I came," she replied. "I thought you deserved to know the truth." After she left, I forwarded the texts to Diane with a simple message: FYI, no action needed. The revelation about my father's deeper involvement hurt, but it no longer had power over me. I had already begun the process of redefining that relationship on my terms. Speaking of my father, he had made 3 attempts to see me since his first visit. Each time I had declined, stating I needed more time. His most recent message had shown the first signs of genuine reflection. "I may have been wrong about some things. When you're ready to talk, I'll listen more and lecture less." It was progress, however small. My mother had been more direct in her communication, calling weekly with updates about her life and asking thoughtful questions about mine. She had even mentioned taking a part-time job at the local library, something my father had previously discouraged. "Henry doesn't like it," she admitted during our last call, but I told him it wasn't up for discussion. The subtle shift in their 40-year power dynamic fascinated me. Perhaps my own stand against my father's control had given her permission to reclaim some independence. My brother William had become an unexpected ally, visiting the beach house twice and calling regularly. During his last visit, he had confessed his own frustrations with our father's management style at the company. "I've been thinking about other opportunities," he admitted. "Watching you rebuild so quickly has been inspiring." 7 weeks after the collapse, I received an email from Jackson Reynolds, the CEO of Preston and Shaw. "I owe you an apology," it began. "Recent investigations have revealed the extent of the misconduct that led to your departure. I was misled by people I trusted, and I failed to perform due diligence before approving your termination." The email continued with an offer to return to Preston and Shaw as Chief Marketing Officer, with a substantial salary increase and reporting directly to him. 3 months earlier, this would have seemed like the ultimate vindication. Now, it felt like a step backward. My response was polite but firm. "Thank you for recognizing the situation and for your offer. At this time, I am committed to my role with Horizon Digital and my consulting practice. I wish Preston and Shaw success in rebuilding client trust." That same week, Richard made one last desperate attempt to alter our divorce settlement, claiming he had been under duress when he agreed to the terms. The judge, reviewing the evidence of his infidelity, financial deception, and gambling debts, dismissed his petition and finalized the divorce with the original settlement intact. As I approached the 2-month mark of my new life, I decided to host a small gathering at the beach house. Sarah, Megan, Zoe, Susan, and a few other women who had supported me through the transition came for a weekend of relaxation and celebration. "To Audrey," Sarah toasted as we sat on the deck watching the sunset, "who lost everything and found herself." The women cheered, and for the first time since the collapse, I felt truly celebratory. The justice I had received had not come through vengeance or direct retaliation, but through standing firmly in my truth and allowing natural consequences to unfold. Martin had lost his position due to his own ethical violations. Richard had destroyed his reputation and finances through his own deception and addiction. My father was slowly recognizing the cost of his controlling behavior as both his children established boundaries and his wife asserted independence. And I had discovered that losing what I thought was everything had actually freed me to create something more authentic and fulfilling. The justice served was not just about others facing consequences, but about me finally claiming the life I deserved. 1 year after what I now simply call the transformation, rather than the collapse, I stood in the newly renovated living room of my beach house, surrounded by friends celebrating my 35th birthday. The changes in the physical space mirrored my personal evolution. Walls that once held generic artwork now featured vibrant paintings by local artists. Furniture chosen for functionality had been replaced by pieces that brought me joy. Large windows that had previously been partially obscured by heavy drapes now stood open to the ocean view, filling the space with natural light. My professional life had similarly transformed. Wilson Strategic Communications had grown from a one-woman consultancy to a boutique firm with 5 employees and a prestigious client roster. My advisory role with Horizon Digital had expanded, and the company had indeed acquired portions of Preston and Shaw in a strategic partnership that industry publications called revolutionary. "Speech," called Sarah, raising her glass. The small gathering of friends turned expectantly toward me. A year ago, I would have prepared detailed remarks for this moment. I began with a smile. I would have rehearsed in front of a mirror and timed myself to ensure I didn't take up too much space or attention, knowing laughter rippled through the room. Today I'm going to speak from the heart, which is a skill I've been practicing this year. When my life imploded 12 months ago, I thought I had lost everything. My career, my marriage, my family relationships, my sense of identity, all gone within 24 hours. I paused, looking around at the supportive faces surrounding me. What I didn't realize then was that I had been living in a beautiful cage, one partially constructed by others, but maintained by me. Losing those external structures forced me to confront the uncomfortable question: who am I when all the labels and roles are stripped away? The room had grown quiet, friends leaning forward slightly. The answer didn't come quickly or easily. It came through therapy sessions with Dr. Laura, who helped me recognize patterns of seeking external validation. It came through quiet mornings watching the sunrise, journaling about who I wanted to become. It came through rebuilding relationships based on authenticity rather than performance. I gestured toward the windows where the Atlantic stretched endlessly toward the horizon. I've learned that healing isn't linear. There are still days when I wake up angry about the betrayals, days when I question my decisions, days when old habits of people-pleasing resurface. But those days grow fewer as I practice self-trust and boundary setting. My gaze found Megan, whose own divorce had preceded mine and whose guidance had been invaluable. I've learned that rock bottom can be a foundation. Everything I've built this year, I built on my own terms, aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. I raised my glass in return toast. To all of you who stood by me, who offered couches to sleep on and shoulders to cry on, who celebrated small victories and reminded me of my worth when I forgot it. And to those who are no longer in my life, but taught me powerful lessons about what I will and won't accept. Thank you all. The party continued late into the evening, friends lingering on the deck under string lights as waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. As conversations flowed around me, I reflected on the journeys of those who had played central roles in my transformation story. Richard's downfall had been swift and comprehensive. After our divorce was finalized, his gambling addiction spiraled further out of control. He lost his sales position when he missed critical client meetings, and subsequent employers quickly discovered his unreliability. According to mutual acquaintances, he had moved to Las Vegas 6 months ago, working as a casino host and still chasing the next big win. Jessica had long since moved on, wisely extracting herself from his chaos. The knowledge of his decline brought me no joy, only a distant sadness for the man I had once loved and the demons he couldn't overcome. I had forgiven him, not for his benefit, but for my own peace of mind. Carrying anger toward him only gave him continued power over my emotional state. My father's journey had been more complex. 3 months after our confrontation at the beach house, he had suffered a minor heart attack, a wake-up call that prompted reflection on his priorities and relationships. During his recovery, my mother had taken unprecedented control of household decisions, and he had been too weak to resist the shifting power dynamic. By the time he regained his physical strength, the emotional landscape of their marriage had permanently changed. My mother continued working at the library, joined a book club, and reconnected with old friends, all without seeking his approval. Our reconciliation began with a handwritten letter he sent 6 months ago, acknowledging his controlling behavior and expressing genuine regret for his response to my crisis. I measured success by external achievements rather than character and happiness, he wrote. In doing so, I nearly lost what matters most, my relationship with my children. We were rebuilding slowly, on my terms. He had visited the beach house twice, awkwardly adapting to his new role as a guest in my space rather than an authority figure. During his last visit, he He had actually asked questions about my business and listened to the answers without offering unsolicited advice, a small miracle by our family standards. My mother's transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. At 62, she had discovered a capacity for independence she had never exercised during her marriage. She had opened her own bank account, taken a computer class at the community college, and started expressing opinions that sometimes directly contradicted my father's. "I wasted decades trying to make your father happy at the expense of my own needs," she told me during a private lunch last month. "Watching you rebuild your life on your own terms inspired me to examine what I truly want for my remaining years." William had finally left our father's company, accepting a position with a competitor that better aligned with his values and management style. The professional separation had ironically improved their personal relationship, removing the complicated dynamics of working for a controlling parent. My own healing journey continued daily. Dr. Laura, my therapist, had helped me identify and address patterns of seeking external validation and perfectionism. "Success and self-worth are not the same thing," she reminded me regularly. "One can fluctuate while the other remains constant." I had developed practices that supported my well-being: morning meditation overlooking the ocean, regular exercise, time boundaries around work, and social connections that energized rather than depleted me. I had learned to listen to my body's signals of stress and respond with self-care rather than pushing through at all costs. Romantically, I had proceeded cautiously. Daniel Reynolds, an ethical investment advisor I met through business connections, had become a regular presence in my life over the past 4 months. Our relationship developed slowly, with clear communication and mutual respect. Unlike Richard, Daniel appreciated my professional success and had his own well-established career, eliminating the competitive dynamic that had poisoned my marriage. One of the most fulfilling aspects of my new life was the mentorship program I had established for women in business. Using my connections and experience, I created a network that provided guidance, opportunities, and support for women navigating corporate environments or launching their own ventures. The monthly meetings, held in my home, had become a highlight for all involved, creating a community of ambitious women who lifted each other up rather than competing. 3 months ago, while organizing old papers, I discovered another letter from my grandfather tucked into a book he had given me years earlier. "Audrey," it read, "the true measure of success isn't what you accumulate, but who you become in the process. Choose growth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and freedom over security when necessary. These choices will serve you well in difficult times." His wisdom, reaching across time and circumstance, had brought me to tears. I had visited his grave the following weekend, placing fresh flowers and silently thanking him for the foresight that had provided not just financial security, but philosophical guidance when I needed it most. As the birthday celebration wound down and friends began departing with warm hugs and promises to meet again soon, I walked alone to the edge of my property where wooden steps led down to the beach. The night air carried a slight chill, and the moon cast a silver path across the dark water. In this quiet moment, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. True security comes from within, not from external sources like relationships, jobs, or family approval. Crisis reveals character, both in yourself and in those around you. Rebuilding requires equal parts forgiveness and boundaries, releasing the past while protecting your future. Success defined by others is a moving target you can never quite reach. Success defined by alignment with your values brings lasting fulfillment. The greatest freedom comes from owning your story completely, the painful chapters as well as the triumphant ones. As I turned back toward my home, lights glowing warmly against the night sky, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the collapse that had forced me to rebuild on a stronger foundation. The path had been painful but necessary, leading me to a life that was authentically mine in a way my previous existence had never been. The transformation was ongoing, a daily choice to live according to my truth rather than others' expectations. But standing here, 1 year after the darkest day of my life, I could honestly say I wouldn't change what happened. Every loss had created space for something more genuine to grow in its place. Have you ever experienced a moment when losing what you thought you needed actually led to gaining what you truly deserved? I would love to hear your stories of unexpected transformation in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories of resilience and growth. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, share this video as a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful transformations. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember that your story is still being written, with every plot twist, an opportunity for a more authentic life.